stole a bit from my father, who, lost a lot of the people who would have gone to see him and talk to him.
Prince Philip's story begins with exile and loss. Born into Greek royalty on June 10, 1921, he was the son of Prince Andrew of Greece and Princess Alice of Battenberg. His bloodline connected him to both Greek and Danish thrones. Yet from his earliest days, he belonged nowhere and everywhere at once. Political upheaval forced his family into exile when Philip was barely a toddler. They found refuge in St. Cloud, near Paris, living in a house provided by relatives. But even in exile, stability remained elusive. His 4 sisters married German princes and disappeared into a world that would soon become enemy territory. His mother suffered a devastating mental breakdown and was placed in an asylum. His father abandoned the family entirely, fleeing to Monte Carlo to live a life of gambling and isolation. At just 9 years old, Philip was shipped off to England, becoming a ward of his maternal grandmother at Kensington Palace. The boy who would one day walk beside the Queen of England grew up essentially orphaned, bouncing between relatives and boarding schools, never quite belonging anywhere. This rootless childhood shaped everything about Philip's character. He learned to be self-reliant, adaptable, and fiercely independent. When he enrolled at Gordonstoun School in Scotland, the harsh, character-building environment felt like home to someone who had already weathered so much loss. It was during these formative years that Philip developed the restless energy and need for autonomy that would later create such tension in his royal role. He was being molded into a man who could stand on his own, never realizing he would spend his life being asked to stand behind someone else. A love story begins. The first spark between Philip and Elizabeth ignited in 1939 at the Royal Naval College in Dartmouth. Elizabeth was just 13, but even then, she was captivated by the confident 18-year-old cadet who seemed to command attention wherever he went. Philip was everything she wasn't: bold, outspoken, unafraid to challenge convention. Their courtship unfolded through wartime letters and stolen moments during rare visits. But from the beginning, Philip's suitability was questioned. Royal advisors whispered about his foreign birth, his lack of fortune, and most dangerously, his sister's marriages to German nobles who had connections to the Nazi regime. The opposition only strengthened Elizabeth's resolve. In 1946, Philip proposed, and she accepted without hesitation. They kept the engagement secret until Elizabeth's 21st birthday, but when it was finally announced, it captured the imagination of a war-weary nation desperate for hope and renewal. On November 20th, 1947, Westminster Abbey witnessed a ceremony that was both deeply personal and profoundly symbolic. Philip renounced his Greek and Danish titles, took the surname Mountbatten, and became the Duke of Edinburgh. It seemed like a new beginning, but it was also the first of many sacrifices he would be asked to make. The crown's heavy price. The early years of their marriage offered glimpses of what might have been. Between 1949 and 1951, they lived in Malta while Philip served in the Royal Navy. For once, they could live like an ordinary couple, free from the suffocating protocols of royal life. Philip thrived in his naval career, and Elizabeth experienced something she would rarely have again: normalcy. But their peaceful chapter ended abruptly in 1952, when King George VI died suddenly. Elizabeth became queen at 25, and with her coronation came a devastating blow to Philip's identity. The question of the royal house name sparked a crisis that would haunt their marriage for years. Traditionally, children take their father's surname. Philip's uncle, Lord Mountbatten, pushed for the royal house to become the House of Mountbatten. Philip himself favored the House of Edinburgh. But Queen Mary and Prime Minister Winston Churchill crushed these hopes. Elizabeth was forced to declare that the royal house would remain Windsor. Philip was devastated. He felt erased, telling friends he was nothing more than a bloody amoeba in the royal machinery. The man who had given up his nationality, his titles, and his naval career wasn't even allowed to pass his name to his children. It wasn't until 1960, after years of behind-the-scenes battles, that a compromise was reached. Their descendants would carry the surname Mountbatten-Windsor, but the damage to Philip's sense of belonging had already been done. The rumors that shook the palace. The 1950s brought whispers that would follow Philip for decades. Stories began circulating about an alleged affair with Galina Ulanova, a celebrated Russian ballerina whose grace and talent had made her an international sensation. The rumors were explosive, not just because of their personal implications, but because of the political tensions between Britain and the Soviet Union. While no evidence ever emerged to support these claims, the speculation created a storm within palace walls. According to sources close to the royal household, Queen Elizabeth was deeply affected by the persistent gossip. She never addressed the rumors publicly, maintaining her characteristic dignity, but those who knew her best could see the strain. The timing made everything worse. Britain and the Soviet Union were locked in Cold War tensions, and the idea of the Queen's husband having any connection to a prominent Soviet figure raised serious concerns about national security. Some royal watchers believe the British government may have intervened to suppress the story, protecting both the monarchy and diplomatic relations. Prince Andrew consistently defended his father, describing him as a man of unwavering honor who placed family above all else. But Princess Anne, who understood Philip's complex nature better than anyone, saw these rumors differently. She recognized them as symptoms of a deeper problem: the public's inability to understand a man who refused to be confined by royal conventions. The alleged affair, whether real or fabricated, highlighted the impossible pressures of Philip's position. Every friendship was scrutinized, every conversation analyzed. For someone who valued authenticity and direct communication, this constant surveillance must have felt like a prison, a marriage under strain. Despite the public facade of unity, those closest to the royal couple could see the cracks forming. Philip's frustration with his limited role grew over the years. He was a man of action forced into a ceremonial position, a natural leader required to walk behind his wife at every public appearance. Elizabeth, for her part, was caught between her love for Philip and her duty to the crown. She had been raised to put duty first, but she could see how the constraints of royal life were affecting her husband. The woman who rarely showed emotion in public was reportedly moved to tears during private discussions about Philip's unhappiness. Their children witnessed the growing tension. Princess Anne later revealed that her father struggled with feeling useful and valued within the royal system. He had given up everything to support Elizabeth's reign, but he often felt like an outsider looking in on his own life. The couple developed coping mechanisms. Philip threw himself into his patronages and environmental causes, finding purpose in work that felt meaningful. Elizabeth learned to give him space when his frustration became overwhelming. But underneath it all, the fundamental tension remained: Philip's need for independence versus the monarchy's demand for conformity. The decision to live apart. In 2017, at the age of 96, Philip made a choice that shocked the royal establishment. He officially retired from public duties and moved to Wood Farm, a modest cottage on the Sandringham estate, leaving behind the grandeur of Buckingham Palace and Windsor Castle. Wood Farm was everything the royal palaces weren't: simple, quiet, and private. Surrounded by countryside and far from the constant attention of palace life, it offered Philip something he had craved for decades: the freedom to be himself. He could paint, read, take long walks, and live without the weight of protocol and ceremony. Princess Anne later revealed that this arrangement wasn't a sign of marital breakdown, but rather a mature decision by two people who understood each other's needs. The Queen needed to remain in London, fulfilling her constitutional duties, while Philip needed the peace that only solitude could provide. But palace insiders suggest the story was more complex. Some reports indicate that Philip had grown increasingly frustrated with the rigid security measures and formal protocols at the main royal residences. The constant presence of guards, the endless ceremonies, and the suffocating formality may have finally become too much for someone who had always chafed against unnecessary restrictions. Others whispered that the Queen's staff may have quietly supported Philip's move, recognizing that the arrangement would reduce tension and allow both royals to live more comfortably. The official narrative emphasized mutual understanding and respect, but behind the scenes, there were hints of deeper struggles. The power of understanding. What made Philip's decision remarkable wasn't the separation itself, but how Elizabeth responded to it. Instead of seeing it as abandonment, she recognized it as her husband's final attempt to find peace after a lifetime of service. She supported his choice, understanding that their love was strong enough to survive physical distance. This wasn't the behavior of a woman whose marriage was failing. It was the wisdom of someone who had learned that sometimes love means letting go. Elizabeth had spent 70 years watching Philip sacrifice his own desires for the sake of duty. Now, in their final chapter, she could give him the greatest gift possible: the freedom to choose his own path. Their children marveled at their parents' ability to navigate this new arrangement. There was no bitterness, no public drama. Just two people who had learned how to honor each other's needs while maintaining their deep connection. Their weekly phone calls and regular visits proved that physical separation didn't diminish their bond. A final reunion. When the COVID-19 pandemic struck in early 2020, Elizabeth and Philip made the surprising decision to isolate together at Windsor Castle. After years of living apart, they were suddenly sharing daily life again as husband and wife. Their children watched this reunion with amazement. Prince Charles later described seeing a renewed closeness between his parents, a connection that had softened and deepened with time. They were once again sharing meals, conversations, and quiet moments together, rediscovering the companionship that had first drawn them to each other as teenagers. The pandemic, for all its tragedy, gave them something precious: uninterrupted time together. Without the demands of public duties or the distractions of separate households, they could simply be Elizabeth and Philip again, not the Queen and her consort. During these final months, those close to them witnessed beautiful moments of tenderness. Philip, even as his health declined, continued to make Elizabeth laugh with his sharp wit and irreverent observations. They would sit together in comfortable silence, their long history speaking louder than words ever could. A legacy of love and sacrifice. When Philip passed away on April 9, 2021, just 2 months before his 100th birthday, it marked the end of the longest royal marriage in British history. Their union had lasted 73 years, weathering wars, scandals, constitutional crises, and the relentless pressure of public scrutiny. Princess Anne's revelations about her father's final years show us that their story was never really about separation. It was about two remarkable people who learned how to love each other authentically, even when that meant living apart. Philip's choice to spend his last years at Wood Farm wasn't a rejection of his royal life or his marriage. It was his final act of self-determination, supported by a wife who understood him better than anyone else ever could. Their love story challenges our fairy tale expectations of royal romance. It wasn't about constant togetherness or public displays of affection. Instead, it was about duty, sacrifice, and the deep understanding that sometimes the greatest act of love is giving someone the freedom to be themselves. The truth Princess Anne has revealed is both heartbreaking and inspiring. Philip and Elizabeth's marriage survived because they learned that love isn't about possession or proximity. It's about respect, understanding, and the courage to support each other's choices, even when those choices are difficult. In an age of instant gratification and disposable relationships, their story offers a different model of partnership, one built on commitment, sacrifice, and the recognition that true love sometimes means letting go. What do you think about Philip and Elizabeth's remarkable journey? Does their story change how you view royal marriages? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to Royal Folder for more intimate stories from behind palace walls. Before you go, check out our other videos exploring the hidden truths of royal life.